All right, what's up guys? Well, it is new pressure washer day today. This is the AR Blue Clean 630 version 2 pressure washer. Now, if you've been with the channel for a little while, you know that last year I bought an active 2.3. I made a couple of videos on it and I was extremely happy with that machine. I didn't think I'd be buying another pressure washer for many, many years. However, it turns out that over time, it's just too loud. Now, even though I have said in the past many times that I don't think it's too loud, the sound resonating in the garage, and more specifically, why this unit is here today, is the sound that it makes throughout the house. And my wife has reliably informed me, considering how much I use the pressure washer, that it is very, very loud. So one day she was like, you know what? Think you can just go buy a Kranzla, knowing that they're much quieter, and who am I to argue? So I was off to Obsessed Garage, where I got this, to buy a Kranzla, specifically the 1322 TS, when I saw that they were advertising this new Blue Clean model. And I'm not usually one for going for like the newest untested stuff, but I saw this and I kind of figured why not? Now again, this is the new AR Blue Clean 630 version 2. I don't really know they can call it a Blue Clean anymore because this upgraded version, they changed the blue plastic to black, which I don't know, I kind of would have preferred they stick with the blue. I kind of have an unintentional, completely blue wall-mounted setup. So a blue pressure washer actually would have been pretty awesome. But yes, I don't mind the black. I think it looks cool. I think a lot of people would probably prefer the black over the blue. Brass pump head. In terms of numbers, now here's the thing. I'm not a pressure wash review and testing channel. I just make videos on the stuff that I use. And so I'm not even gonna test this unit for the numbers. I'm just gonna take the guys at Obsessed Garage have way more testing experience when it comes to pressure washers than I ever would, so I'm gonna take their numbers for it. Now they say that based on their testing, they're getting 980 PSI, 2.35 gallons per minute out of this machine, which is like, I mean, that's about as perfect as you can get in terms of numbers for a pressure washer that is being used for car detailing. But the main reason, all of that said, the main reason that I went with this is because of the sound volume. So this was tested at about 67 to 72 decibels, which is insanely quiet compared to the Active 2.3, which I believe is clipping about 90. That's a massive difference in sound. Now, I was gonna do an unboxing on this, but I really didn't find that necessary because this is it. This is what you get. You get the pressure washer and a couple of things we'll talk about here. And I really appreciate that. I think that at this price point, about $950 for this unit, that they figure that anybody who's buying this probably already has their own hose and sprayer and wands and nozzles and whatever, and that no point in charging more to include stuff in that we're probably not going to use. It is a solid unit. I mean, this thing weighs, I want to say around 50 pounds, give or take. In terms of the features, not a whole lot to go over here, except for two things in particular that I would point out to people who are considering this unit. One, if you remember, the original was called the 630 TSS, which stood for Total Stop System, which meant that you had it off, or when you turned it on, the unit was on and it would only run when you pulled the trigger, and then it would immediately turn off when you release the trigger. Same with the Active 2.3. However, now you have off, on, and then there's also now a bypass that will keep the motor running constantly. I don't know how many applicable uses there are. Maybe in like a high industrial use case or something like that, you might want to have this thing running full time. But I think for most people, and including myself, it'll just stay on the traditional TSS, only run when the trigger is pulled setting. Now, the other thing that I would call a feature, just because it is really good design, is how we deal with oil in the pump head. So I did a video a couple of weeks ago on changing the oil in the Active 2.3 pressure washer, and if you saw that, it's not the hardest thing in the world to do, but like clearly changing the oil was a little bit of an afterthought with that pump head. Not the case with this one. So with this, you get a fill plug, a drain plug back here, and then a window on the side where you can actually see how much oil is in the unit. That's how you make a pump head. You also have a couple of slots for your nozzles on the top here in the back to kind of stay out of the way. Really solid handle on here that you can see is like bolted down. And otherwise, yeah, I mean, it's just not a bad looking machine. I certainly wouldn't say it's as attractive as a Kranzla. Like Kranzlas, I think, are like really good looking pressure washers. This just kind of gets the job done, but it's not bad. It's not bad. And quite frankly, it's gonna sit on the shelf anyway. So as long as it's quiet for my purposes, I don't really mind. Now, the other thing to note is that these brackets on the bottom here, I'm not quite sure I understand the thought process behind how these brackets were designed, but on the bottom of them, they do have like little rubber pads, little rubber feet on the bottom. So if you have this mounted on a shelf, it'll offer a little bit of damping. However, Obsessed Garage does sell a shelf mounting hardware kit specifically for this unit. So I will link that, of course, with everything we're gonna talk about today in the description below if you wanna check it out. But I did get that kit. It does require drilling into your metal shelf, but I think it'll be worth it because that will do a much better job of minimizing vibration and noise of this, especially on a metal shelf. So with this unit, a couple of things that you get here. Now, this actually is how it shipped. This was in place of the breather tube for the oil fill plug here. So it comes with this already attached. And the first thing that you do is take this off and put this breather tube in, which I already did. Next, you get a filter here for the inlet port. Then there's this like little pick tool that I think you can use for like cleaning. There's some directions in here. I haven't opened it. And then of course, the manual for it. So that's it. Now, a quick note on the power requirements for this. This will require a dedicated 20 amp circuit. And in addition to making sure that you have the right power requirements to run this, also make sure you have the right outlet type. So presumably with the design of this, to make sure that it goes into a 20 amp circuit, because this would be the kind of outlets that you use. This has, and I forget the technical term for these type of connections, but it's the one that has the vertical and the horizontal prongs. So my garage was outfitted with the classical style, so I had to wire in some new ones, which wasn't a huge deal, but yeah, so just make sure you have both the power requirements and the outlet type to support it. Okay, so let's talk about fittings and connections real quick. Now, if you don't care about this stuff, you've already got all your setup figured out, and you just want to see how this thing performs or some thoughts on it, feel free to jump ahead because I usually chapter all my videos. However, if you were adding this to an existing wall-mounted setup, or if you were building one, you might want to check this out because I ran into a little bit of a problem when I did a test fitting. I'll walk through how I solved that. But first, it is worth noting that if you buy this machine from Obsessed Garage, they'll also include this. This is a 3/8" female NPT to male M14 22 millimeter adapter, right? So this machine comes with a 3/4" garden hose female adapter here for your inlet port. And then this is a 3/8" male NPT port for your jumper hose or directly to your pressure washer hose. Now, if you are using quick disconnects like I am, this isn't going to work. And so the fitting that they provide with this helps make that hookup possible. So this just threads on here, and then your quick disconnect or your hose directly can thread onto here. However, the problem that I ran into was with my inlet port, right? So the Active 2.3 that I used to have had the inlet port on the side and then the outlet port on the front, which worked great with my setup. I only have a 2-foot inlet hose, which is, it's pretty sturdy, it's pretty thick, so its flexibility, it doesn't move much, and you don't really want it to move too much. But I found that when I situated this on the shelf, the inlet hose would not reach the front. So the only two options there were to get a longer hose, and the blue hose that I have that I really like, I didn't feel like disconnecting it. The next shortest size they make from the 2-foot one I have was 6.5. And so the other option is this. So this is a 3/4" NPT female elbow. And so with this, you can attach this to the front and then have this just curve out of the side and then hook up your inlet port that way. Now, once you introduce this connection, it kind of complicates things a little bit. So here was the flow that I had to go through. And just remember, when you're dealing with fittings and everything like that, you either have male and female, and then you have NPT, National Pipe Thread, and GHT, Garden Hose Thread. So really, it's any one of those combinations, and then you just got to figure out what you need in order to make one end reach the other end. So the flow goes like this. So this is a male 3/4" GHT to male NPT 3/4". So this goes in your inlet port here, and thus starts your 3/4" male NPT. From there, goes into the elbow. So you have another 3/4" female NPT port, and here you need a male NPT to a female GHT. And finally, the quick disconnect section that goes to the hose. This is a 3/4" male GHT going to the 3/4" female GHT, and that completes the setup. So this gets hooked up in here, and then the inlet hose goes right in there. Now, with the included adapter that you get from Obsessed Garage, this works fine with my quick disconnect, which could screw right onto it, and then the hose would be ready to go. However, because I'm now doing the 90-degree elbow here, I thought, why not try to also get the 90-degree for the jumper hose? And so this is a 3/8" female to 3/8 inch male NPT fitting. So this will just go right on the pressure washer as it is. And then you can use the adapter that you get from Obsessed Garage to plug in to the other end. And then you have your quick disconnect that hooks onto that and then into your hose, and you are good to go. So anyway, these were the many fittings that I needed to make this setup work. I didn't really need to go that route with the outlet hose, like I said, but I just kind of thought, you know, instead of having it come in and stick out a little bit on the front, why not get everything to the side? Again, I will leave links to all of these exact parts in the description below. However, double check your setup because you might require something a little bit different. All right, so everything is all hooked up. The way this thing comes out of the box is probably fine. However, this valve here is a pressure regulator, so you can vary the pressure a little bit with that. I was kind of tooling around with it a little bit before I hooked everything up. So what happened is the first time I went to go turn it on and had it in the TSS position, which means it should only run while the trigger is being pulled. When I turned it on the TSS spot, it just constantly ran. So what I think happened is that I was kind of messing with this a little bit, and I think I had it a little bit too loose. And so the machine was unable to build pressure and just kept running. So again, how it comes out of the box is probably fine. But just an FYI that the first time you probably want to turn this all the way clockwise until it doesn't go anymore. You don't have to like really tighten it, but just, you know, turn it until it stops. And then that is the max pressure setting for the machine, and it will be fine. And from there you can adjust it a little bit, but just don't make it too loose. Related to that pressure valve, and this might be a little bit anecdotal, but I did notice that when I had it all the way, you know, tightened, and ran the machine, when it starts and stops, it has sort of like a relatively normal jolt when it turns on and off. However, as I dialed back the pressure a little bit, I noticed that the kick when it turns off seemed a little bit more prominent. So not really sure if that is actually a thing, but just a heads up that that might be the case as you mess with that pressure valve. Here is what it sounds like. And so as demonstrated, you have the TSS on position here, or the full bypass. So constant run, I don't know how useful that's going to be, but it's cool to have that as an option. Let's talk about the tone real quick, the tone and the volume. Now the volume, and I've already tested this being inside the house, hearing what it sounds like. I mean, I still have to, you know, fix the vibration issue with the mounting hardware, but from the volume alone, this is a way quieter machine. In fact, you could stand in the garage, have this thing mounted in the garage, you could be in here, and it's not nearly as jarring as the Active was. So it is substantially quieter. Now, in terms of the actual tone of this machine, that's another thing that I was very pleasantly surprised at. So going from the Karcher 1800 to the Active 2.3 was awesome because the Karcher 1800 had a very high-pitched whine on spin up and spin down, and even while it was running, and the Active 2.0 for that matter sound exactly the same way. The Active 2.3 had a deeper induction motor sound, and it was much more pleasing to listen to if you have to sit there and listen to a pressure washer at all. This compared to and I don't mean to make this a difference, you know, like a comparison to the Active 2.3 because they're different machines, but this, compared to the 2.3, it is a much deeper tone, like even way deeper than by comparison, it makes the Active 2.3 sound kind of high pitched, which is insane. So in terms of tone and sound, that alone I think was worth the cost of admission. So, all right, let's go outside, foam cannon and spray tests. This is an OG spec Musmatic 5.0 rubber tip nozzle. So a little bit of a kick when you pull the trigger, not crazy. I feel like the Active 2.3 had just a slight more of a ramp up before it went full pressure on you. So this you kind of feel the kick a little bit more, but it's by no means is it fatiguing, but it's just a tad bit more noticeable. Next, the minimum amount of distance between your hand and the water flow before you start to feel pain, which is usually a good indicator of how far back you should be from the car with the spray, so that you don't, you know, inadvertently maybe affect the paint. So check it out. So right about there, that's pretty much at the point, which is maybe like 7 inches-ish, is pretty much at the point where I can start to feel like really the pressure of the water on my hand. So that's, yeah, that's crazy. So that's probably the minimum distance that I would be from my car to use this as a sprayer, and that's not bad at all. It feels like so much more water, so much more, you know, flow, which again, it's over 2.3 GPM, versus the amount of pressure, which is, again, just ideal. But yeah, man. It just feels like a lot of water coming out of this thing. That's awesome. Let's hook up the foam cannon, see what's doing. Actually, spray off the wheel first. That is a decent amount of, I hate to call it pressure because, you know, there's a difference between flow and pressure, but like that's serious water coming out of this thing. All right, so foam cannon test. This is Breakbuster, not diluted, MTM PF22 foam cannon with a 1.5 millimeter nozzle. I think one of the things that's interesting about this is the feel of this coming from a 5.0 orifice nozzle. Like I kind of thought at 5, I thought we were being very conservative in terms of, you know, the size of the nozzle that we're using here, the size of the orifice. However, even with a 5, that's just wild amount of flow of water coming out of this thing. So yeah, man, with a 5, no complaints here, not at all. All right, well, I'm gonna go do the rest of these wheels and then we'll come back and we will check out the foam for the soap, right? So again, that's gonna be coming out of 1.45 millimeter nozzle foam cannon. Show you guys what that looks like. But yeah, all right, coming soon. All right, so let's wrap this up. Some thoughts on this machine after a full use of it to wash a car. I wanted to get at least one full wash out of it to kind of try to summarize what I think of it. When hooking this up, what I kind of expected was, I kind of was thinking it was gonna be about a 1-to-1 difference between this and the Active 2.3 that I had, and that it was gonna be a quieter machine to make the wife happy. That's what I sort of expected, and boy, I was wrong. I kind of thought that, detecting the performance differences out of a pressure washer like that would only be perceptible to somebody who maybe has experience testing a lot of different units. I didn't really think I was gonna notice much of a difference. Again, extremely wrong. And I'll tell you where I really noticed it. Like, sure, the sprayer had a little bit more, little more kick to it. When I was doing all the wheels, it was doing a great job of getting all the, the soap off it and the contact wash and everything like that. But it was actually the Prefoam was where I really noticed it. So if how like when you have like a high pH Prefoam, underneath the suds, there's that, little bit of film, and you have to, usually it takes another, pass or two with the sprayer in order to rinse that all off. This just blew through that. And so after that, like watching that happen, it was kind of like, oh, I kind of get it now. I kind of understand the class of pressure washer tier this thing is in. And, again, given the numbers for it and how it performs, I mean, it's limited experience, but this has to be one of the best pressure washers for car detailing. I'm sure it does great at other things, but given that I feel like this was made specifically for the detailing industry, and it is by all accounts a phenomenal pressure washer. And it just throws a torrential amount of water through that sprayer. Like if you've used the gas high, PSI pressure washer before, you can be like here, you kind of feel that sting of the water, but to get that close before you can really feel it and it still puts out that much water, just incredible flow rate. So yeah, again, only one time used so far, but it is a noticeably, markedly better performing pressure washer, at least coming from the 2.3. The 2.3 is great, don't get me wrong, but you can immediately tell that this is better. Next, foam. So foam production, I didn't really know what to expect with foam. So my foam cannons, as I mentioned before, has a 1.5 and a 1.45 millimeter orifice. Even the foam production with a 1.5, I thought was pretty impressive, right? It was thin enough to where it can encapsulate all that dirt and run it off the car, but thick enough to leave plenty on the paint for when you're doing the contact wash. So I'm sure the 1.25 will be better, and we'll do a comparison of that. But theoretically, if all you had was the 1.5 through this thing, I don't think you would be disappointed. I think it works. I think it's plenty good foam production for most purposes. Okay, and so the last thing I want to talk about is buying versus upgrading. So a couple of thoughts on that. In terms of buying, like if you are in the market for a new pressure washer, maybe you have an entry-level model that you've been using for a bunch of years and you figured that now's time to buy something that's a little more professional grade. If it were me, I would buy this all day, every day, over and over again. Considering that it's a couple $100 less than a Kranzla and at least equal in performance, it's, I would just buy this over and over, right? I think it's that good. After only one wash, I'm super sold on this. If you're considering upgrading, like let's say, and I'm not even gonna compare other pressure washers because I don't know any of them, the Active 2.3. We'll use that one as our example here. So if you bought a 2.3 when they came out, a lot of hype around them, maybe you saw one of my past videos and bought one based off of, me talking about it. Honestly, if you're happy with the 2.3, I would not upgrade. Knowing what I know about this machine, and like I said, it is better in all available metrics, quieter, easier to maintain, better performance, I still wouldn't upgrade if you're happy with the 2.3. Like I said, the singular reason why I got this was just because of the noise resonating throughout the house, and a very distant second was like, oh, I can make some content on this. But if you have the 2.3 and you're happy with it, I wouldn't upgrade. I think the 2.3 is more than capable to do daily washes and stuff like that, or even if you're just like a weekend person, whatever it is, I would just keep the Active 2.3 on your wall, on your cart, if that's what you have. But like I said, if you got the budget for it and you're in the market for something new, this is worth checking out. So I will leave a link to this in the description below if you want to check it out, along with all of the fittings that it took to get this all figured. I mean, that might only apply to a couple of people, but still it's out there. And in all of my videos, I have a link to a Google Doc that has the complete wall-mounted setup if you're interested in checking that out, and I'll update that with all this stuff as well. So in the meantime, if you have any questions, let me know. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.